Are you taking a GLP-1, something like Ozempic, Mounjaro, Zepbound, and not seeing the results that you had hoped for? Or maybe you've been on it a while and you've suddenly plateaued and you just want to lose another 5 or 10 pounds, but you can't figure out how to get that extra weight off. Well, today I want to talk about a few things, a few tricks that you may want to consider or try, or at least have an understanding of why our bodies hold on to weight. I see this frequently with our clients that come into Juve Wellness. We've either started on a GLP or they want to start on a GLP and they're concerned, obviously, about investing in this journey and not getting the results that they want, or they've tried it at other places and haven't gotten to goal. And my constant conversation is we can help you get to goal because this matters, and it matters to us from a different perspective. As I've mentioned several times in my other videos, if you're not losing weight, it's a sign that something else is going on, and we need to dig a little bit deeper. And oftentimes correcting small imbalances can actually be the difference between weight loss success and weight loss frustration, and or sometimes, unfortunately, failure. In this video, we are going to talk about 5 things that you should consider before you start a GLP-1, or if you're currently taking a GLP-1, things that you can add to make your outcome more successful. Not only will you feel better, but your journey on the medication or on the peptides will be much, much, much easier for you. So let's start with macros. Let's talk first about protein. And just a reminder, macros are protein, carbs, and fats. So let's start with protein and how critical getting enough protein is to the success of these medications. Oftentimes, when we start a GLP-1 on clients, one of the first things they say, which is what we want, is I don't have an appetite, or they may feel a little nauseous, or they may get constipated. And all of those things are not the side effects that we want to have to deal with. But a normal inclination or a normal response to any of those symptoms is to cut back on what you're eating. Eat small meals and eat more carbs, maybe more fat-dense snacks or grazing throughout the day. It's exactly opposite of what we want our clients to do. So out of the gate, we are coaching on a very high protein intake for many reasons. The most important is if you don't have enough protein, your body will not release the fat. If you don't have enough protein and you still lose weight, it's because you're losing muscle. If you followed any of the GLPs through their maturation, one of the biggest risks of being on a GLP-1 is significant muscle mass loss. It's twofold. 1, we're not taking in enough protein, or 2, they're not exercising and there's not enough resistance training to build muscle mass. You can't really build muscle if you don't have enough protein, so they really go hand in hand. So a couple rules of thumb, you need at least 1 gram of protein for every 2 pounds of body weight. Many people would say it's 1 gram of protein for every 1 pound of body weight. But if you're going from a low protein diet up to 150 grams of protein a day, that is a lot of protein. So we like to start from a place of success and give milestones that we can actually meet. So let's say you're a 150 pound individual, you need to be eating at least 75 grams of protein a day. And we want you to start your day, whether this is a late breakfast or early lunch or breakfast, with 30 grams of protein. And you can get that in a cup of Greek yogurt. That's 18 grams right there. A cup of Greek yogurt and 2 hard-boiled eggs, and you're at 30 grams of protein. Let's say a cup of Greek yogurt and a few tablespoons of hemp seeds. That puts you at 30 grams of protein. There are protein-dense foods that you almost have to shift your mindset to focus on, even if sometimes you're not terribly hungry. Also creating a structured time to eat versus grazing throughout the day. It will help so that you get hungry enough to want to eat versus grazing on processed food or chips or crackers, things that are easy to eat that may actually feel a little bit more palatable, particularly in the beginning if you've got any sort of nausea or gut issues, which I will get to. So the next very important macro is fats. And what sorts of fats? We want to focus on, obviously, healthy fats like butter, fatty fish like salmon, or nuts, eggs. We want to avoid things like trans fats and canola oil, processed foods. We want to avoid foods that actually make us want to eat more foods and actually do a lot of damage to our cells and to our mitochondria. So we want to give our body healthy fats. And if you consider the fact that our cell membranes are actually made up of fats, we need to actually replenish our body with good, healthy omega-3 fats so that we have healthy cell membranes that can function and be protected and create more energy. The last macro we're going to focus on are carbohydrates, which historically have sort of gotten a bad rap, particularly in the last 25, 30 years when we had these very fad, low-carb diets and all of the nutrients were stripped out of a lot of foods and we were eating a ton of processed foods that were low carb. We want to stay away from those types of carbs and we want to aim to get 75 to 100 grams of very healthy, nutrient-dense carbohydrates. So vegetables, particularly dark leafies or broccoli, fruit, have a lot of carbs but provide a lot of nutrients that our body actually needs. The next area that I'd like to focus on is energy production. Our body doesn't release fat and weight if we don't have a well-oiled energy producing machine. And that only happens if we have the nutrients, the most fundamental building blocks for our mitochondria, which is the powerhouse of every single cell, to actually function efficiently. And when I mention building blocks, I'm talking about things like the most basic nutrients. So all of the B vitamins, B1, B2, B3, B6 is critical, B9, B12, all of the B complex vitamins, magnesium, and omega-3s. Also CoQ10 falls into this bucket. If you don't have the most basic fundamental components for your cells to function and to actually create energy, then your body slows down. And this is what we're referring to when we say the metabolism slows down. If each cell isn't churning at its most efficient pace, then our metabolism starts to slow down. And something that's really, really, really interesting, we can actually create more mitochondria to produce more energy if we give our bodies and our cells the right substrates. The biggest metabolic driver as we are trying to lose weight is exercise. And although this likely goes without saying, and it might be something many people don't want to do, it is critical for weight loss success. And it's critical for several reasons. The first is building muscle. So the more muscle we have, the more lean muscle we have in our body, the more efficient our body is at handling glucose, which is all of the food that we take into our body is broken down into what is called glucose, and it's the way our body ends up creating energy. If we don't have lean muscle mass, then we start to create things like insulin resistance. Our glucose rises in our bloodstream, and we cannot produce as much energy. The more lean muscle mass we have, the better equipped our body is at utilizing the glucose that we take in through our food, and it decreases insulin resistance and increases the utilization of that glucose. So as soon as we're taking the food in, our muscles are churning through it, creating more energy, and it allows us to do even more things. The inverse is true. If we're not exercising and we don't have enough lean muscle mass, then we don't have anywhere for that glucose to go. So then, refer back to my previous videos, we start to create increased insulin resistance, and we also start to have a lot more glucose in our bloodstream, and that leads to type 2 diabetes and just a cascade of other metabolic issues that we are all trying to avoid. So the importance of resistance training, movement, exercise at least 4 days a week is critical. The more energy we create, the more efficient we can be with the food that we take in. And there's a huge improvement if we're taking GLP-1s in their effectiveness. For a while, I have theorized the combination or the connection between good gut health and the effectiveness of GLP-1s. So much so that anyone that comes to Juve Wellness for a GLP automatically gets magnesium citrate, because making sure gut motility is maintained is critical if you're going to take a GLP-1. When we inject a GLP-1, it slows down the motility or the movement of our gastrointestinal tract. And that's why we have side effects like heartburn and constipation, because it brings everything almost to like a screeching halt. That's actually part of the reason that we have longer satisfaction or satiety. Now, the side effect of that is constipation, heartburn, and other nausea, other unwanted gastrointestinal impacts. We need to keep things moving. That's the biggest takeaway. However you can make that happen, it needs to be intentional. And going back to a previous point I made, if we're not able to excrete, then we're obviously not going to have an appetite to take in more protein or the nutrients that we need for our body to function. Finally, last but not least, number 5 is ensuring that we have good hormonal balance. And in this case, what I'm referring to is cortisol first, and then for women in perimenopause and menopause, estrogen. Both hormones drive insulin resistance. Let's talk about cortisol first. So cortisol goes up when we are stressed, when we have sleepless nights, we're not getting enough rest, when our nervous system is not regulated, when we eat lots of processed food. Sometimes our cortisol just goes up because we live a stressful life. The world can be very stressful, right? So ensuring that we manage our cortisol, manage our stress levels is going to be critical for whether you're successful in your GLP journey. Another is estrogen. If your estrogen is not balanced, particularly in perimenopause and menopause, it drives insulin resistance, which drives weight gain. Even in the case of GLPs, which actually help with insulin resistance, estrogen fluctuations can further exacerbate insulin resistance and make it even more difficult to actually lose weight. So it's critical, ding, 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 that we test both cortisol and estrogen, because both of them need to maintain a very delicate balance so that our body feels safe enough to release excess weight. Okay, so tying it all together, we want to ensure enough protein intake. Remember, that's 1 gram of protein for every 2 pounds of body weight minimum. It actually should be closer to 1 to 1, but we want to aspirationally, let's get to 1 gram for every 2 pounds of body weight. We want to ensure healthy fat intake. So reminder, avocado, olives, fatty fish, eggs, omega-3 rich foods, ghee. We want to avoid processed food. We want to ensure that we are creating an environment for our mitochondria to thrive. And what does that mean? We want to create an environment that is energy rich so that everything we take in from a food perspective is actually turned into energy and it's expelled through energy. We burn it off through our muscles and just through normal functioning of our body rather than storing it as fat. We want to ensure great gut health. I cannot overstate how important gut health is to the success of GLPs. And finally, we want to ensure that we have good hormone balance. So ensuring that we test, we don't guess, where our cortisol is, if it needs to be adjusted, as well as estrogen, particularly for perimenopause and menopausal women. There are therapies and treatments that can be implemented to not only help you feel better as you are entering perimenopause or going through menopause, but actually improve your success on your weight loss journey if that's where you are, or ensure that you don't gain weight during menopause because estrogen just sort of tanks during that process. If you're taking a GLP-1 or if you're on a weight loss journey and just not seeing the success that you want, perhaps you need to do a little bit of a deeper dive. We can help you with that. At Juve Wellness, we have perfected metabolic testing. And what does that mean? We are looking to ensure that you have the right nutrients. We're looking to ensure that you're creating enough mitochondria. We look at your hormone levels. We look at your gut health to ensure that if you want your body to function optimally, we actually give it what it needs to do just that. And we do not guess, we always test. Until next time, I hope you continue to thrive. And remember, everybody deserves to feel good.